Welcome to the Orange Hammer Podcast. My name is Corbett Storick. I've been a licensed general contractor for 8+ years, specializing in new construction, renovation, furniture building. I'm the son of an architect and an interior designer, and I've been surrounded in this industry since birth, watching all aspects from concept, design, build, punch list, and of course, all the problems that come up in between. In my time in Durham, North Carolina, I've noticed a significant gap in knowledge between homeowners who need work and the people who do the work. On this podcast, I hope to break down the process of homeownership from the perspective of both the homeowner and the contractor in an effort to help raise the knowledge of homeowners about their homes and the construction/renovation process. I hope you enjoy. If you're enjoying the Orange Hammer Podcast, or if you have a topic that you want covered, or have recently done a project, please contact the Orange Hammer Podcast. The Orange Hammer Podcast is on Instagram and Facebook. Please like and subscribe, share on whatever platform you're enjoying your podcast on. Also, check out our YouTube channel, The Orange Hammer. The Orange Hammer Podcast is proud to be brought to you by CRS Contracting LLC for all your construction and handyman needs, new buildings to renovations, furniture building, EV charger install, or even a TV mounted. You can call me, Corbett Storick. It'd be my pleasure to help you. You can find me on Instagram at CRS Contracting. WSDG, the Walter Storick Design Group, specialists in architectural and acoustical consulting. Check out WSDG.com. And Taylor Bragg, for all your artistic needs in all mediums. You can find her on Instagram at brag_about_art. That's brag, BRGG, with 2 G's. She's the fantastic artist behind the Orange Hammer logo, and she did my fantastic table painting of my podcasting table. Welcome, everybody. My guest today is Jeremy Stollings. He is a Durham native, a very talented welder. You could check out his wonderful artwork at Ironwood Crafts on Facebook and ironwoodcrafts.com. You can also check out one of his flawless bottle trees that is in front of the North Carolina Museum of History in downtown Raleigh. Jeremy, how are you? Thanks for coming.
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you being here. So I know that we are actually going to have you back for a second podcast where we're going to discuss the amazing events that took place where you more or less built your own house. But today, let's just kind of jump right into your aspects of home ownership, before that. So I mentioned you're a Durham native just for fun and shits and giggles. I mean, the life building wise that you have seen come over Durham of the city. I mean, do you even recognize the city?
In a lot of places, no. It's a different world in Durham.
Yeah.
It's fun because there's a lot of stuff to do. The food, the nightlife, it's more than crack whores and street shootings. So.
I mean, that's unfortunately that stuff still exists here, but
nothing like it was.
Nothing like it was. Yeah. I remember once, I believe you told me a story that the old Durham Bulls stadium, if you were doing anything over there that was not seeing a Bulls game, you were in trouble.
Oh yeah, that was ground zero for. Just bad part of town. Just game and go home. Yeah. Now that corner literally has my favorite coffee shop, my favorite restaurant, not my favorite bar, but a great one in Barcade. Shout out to Barcade, video games and beer. What a great combo. I mean, the farmer's market.
And the farmer's market. Yeah, it's like giant, the greatest part of town.
Buildings with hipsters that, they knocked down the original buildings and kept a couple of the walls because they look cool.
I do. Yeah. I don't exactly remember the address, but I know exactly the apartment building you're referring to.
The Liberty Arts building.
Yeah. Just because they wanted to keep that mural that was on.
The old facade. It's historic. And,
I do love that though. Like that concept, like obviously maybe it's not obvious to everybody listening, but it's obvious to you and I. That costs more time and more money to save that
so much
mural.
more.
But
the fact that
the city actually made them do that, though.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. The fact that the city, and don't get me wrong, I am not a pro government red tape. In fact, they are the bane, whatever, of my existence when it comes to dealing with permits and stuff. But I gotta tip my cap where it's appropriate. Like, that's cool, because every city has a Dollar Tree and a Target and a movie theater, and they all look the same. And these grids, it's not complicated. I mean, at some point, a city is a city and garbage collection is garbage collection. But when you drive by and you see a gas station from the 50s that they were forced to keep that look, and then they turn into a restaurant.
Yeah.
I mean, that's cool.
There was a whole movement, I'm sure it's still ongoing. I've got the bumper sticker on my cars, "Keep It Dirty, Durham," because they were tearing down all these classic tobacco district warehouses and, putting in, new apartments and stuff. And the city actually came in and made them stop. And they refurbed all these old, and they're amazing apartments now. But it cost them a lot more to refurb them and make them livable than it did to just bulldoze them and start from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you've got to be, I don't know what other term I can even think of other than just a ballsy developer to go, well, I have an option to buy land that's not in this zone and build up a cookie cutter, whatever. Or no, you know what? I'm going to put my name and reputation and time and money on trying to do that. And I mean, the success, you look back and the success is there and good for all parties involved. And I don't even know these people. I'm just giving them the kudos. Yeah. And I can't even shout out their name because I don't even know them. But I drive downtown Durham, and I'm proud to be here. It's pretty cool.
The town has a lot of history to it, and it's they've done a lot of gentrification, but they are trying to keep the history.
Yeah, I unfortunately am part of that gentrification. I mean, I've bought a number of rundown houses that were not even livable, and now they are too expensive for, a certain demographic to rent. And, that's what we do for a living, but I'm kind of the problem a little bit.
I've flipped a house in Durham too. So
yeah. And that perfect segue, let's jump into, so about how old were you and how long ago when you bought your first home?
I'm going to say late 20s, 26, 27.
Okay. And was that in Durham? I know for a second, I think you lived in Virginia, but I'm not 100% sure.
I lived in Asheville for a while, but I didn't own a house there. Okay. And then I had property in Virginia, but I never actually built anything there.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that first house, what kind of house was it?
It was, single-story ranch, kind of north, a little bit out of town, but still convenient to everything. Again, I did a lot of shopping and looking around before I found it.
And under that umbrella of shopping and looking around. So obviously you were a first-time home buyer then.
Yeah.
Did you what's the mental process and kind of like maybe a little bit of background of like where you were in your life? Like, were you married and you had a kid on the way and you needed a home? Were you just, I want to invest in a house, I want to maybe find something that's run down because I've got some handyman skills?
Yeah,
like what was the mental aspect?
I had actually just met my now wife at the time, but we had literally just started dating. So she at that time wasn't that much of a factor in it, which led me to buy a house that was almost an hour away from where she lived. But it was, I knew I had the skills. So I was looking for a house that needed a lot of work that I could get cheap because I also didn't have any money. But I just hated the thought of throwing all that cash at the apartment complex that I was living, and it just didn't make sense for me. It's like I knew I could find this diamond in the rough somewhere and make it right. And
so you mentioned that you wanted specifically a rundown house because you wanted to do some stuff. So what background wise led you to, I guess, like become handy?
It's, growing up as a kid, I, some of my earliest memories are helping Dad, build a shed, or my grandparents build a garage, and we did all of that, top to bottom, pouring the concrete and building the framing.
And you took to it with a little bit of passion.
As a small kid, my parents put an addition on our house, so literally I was barely able to hold a hammer, and my dad and the guy who did it would give me cutoffs, and I would sit there and hammer them together into weird shapes, and I'm making a house. And that was, I've always done it. And I got in trouble for taking apart all of our appliances and stuff because I wanted to see how they worked.
Mom's brand new dishwasher in pieces on the floor.
Yeah, we had a rule that was established fairly early on that I couldn't take anything apart until it was broken.
Gotcha.
I wasn't allowed to break it so that I could take it
right.
apart.
Once it's broken, though, have at it.
Yeah.
Unscrew that thing all day. My dad would give my brother and I, like he ran an architectural office, so computers would have to be upgraded on the reg. And so the old ones, there does come a point where it's not even worth the weight of the plastic. So they're like, here, smash it. So we would like turn it into a fake fort office in the woods and break them and unscrew them and duct tape parts together and pretend we're like MacGyver or James Bond or whatever. Yeah. So.
Oh yeah.
So that's not necessarily everybody's position. You grew up doing some handy stuff, and that skill level leads you to the ability to go, okay, I want to buy a house, but I don't need to move into it tomorrow, or even have it be what we would call move-in ready.
Yeah, well, at that point, I was a single guy, so I had actually spent several months living in the back of my truck, driving around, the Northeast, just kind of hanging out. So I figured, worst case, I own the property. It was kind of wooded. I'll sleep in the truck while I'm remodeling it, or go sleep at Jana's house, and there I can take a shower and sleep in a bed for a while.
Talk to me real quick about this, like living in a truck life. I know it's not construction related, but it's my podcast, and that shit sounds interesting. So you were living in the back of a pickup truck. Did you like build a bed, or did you just throw a sleeping bag in there?
It had a camper shell on the back.
Okay.
And I wanted to, I had a couple of months from when I was transitioning from Asheville to Durham, and I was like, let me drive the Appalachian Trail. I didn't have enough time to actually hike it, but it was one of those bucket list things. So I threw the dog and camp stove and a cooler in the back of the truck, and we started. Didn't quite drive the whole thing. I didn't start down in Georgia, but I went all the way up through Maine, and again, I didn't drive all the way out to Katahdin, but
that's still awesome.
I hit all the neat spots along the way. And
approximately how long were you doing that?
I was doing that for close to a month, really.
And camped the whole way?
I actually had friends in New England, so there were a couple of times where I would meet up with people.
Grab a shower?
It just happened that one of my old roommates' mom was getting remarried while I was there in town, so I actually stayed at the hotel with the wedding party, which was my roommate and a bunch of other friends that I knew. So it was a great little reunion, and I got to take a shower and hang out with the guys. And
gotcha. Get a nice wedding meal.
Yeah, it was.
Life finds a way. From,
whatever
that Jeff Goldblum quote there.
The timing was awesome, and it was just one of those kind of transformative points in my life where I knew. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and it was just. Get out there and find yourself a little bit. And
gotcha.
It was fun.
Not everybody has that opportunity. And as you just said, transformative. I don't know anybody who's told me they've done any kind of traveling and then followed it with, and I really regretted it and it didn't do anything for me. Like traveling is amazing. And there's lots of types of traveling. That sounds incredible. I mean, a month long.
It was, I was by myself. There were times where I didn't see anybody but a gas station attendant for 3 or 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
And
so that leads you into, mentally you build up the confidence to go, well, I could just keep living in my truck. And if I have to turn the water off, I did the woods for 4 or 5 days with nobody but a gas station attendant.
It's Durham. I had family here.
Right.
My parents and my brother were more than supportive. If I needed a hand doing something, there were always people here that could help. So,
and that's also leads to another point that when, somebody listening is like, well, I can't do that because I don't have people. Like, not everybody has people. Like, your dad, obviously handy enough to show you all those things as you were a kid.
Yeah.
To, probably handy enough to, oh yeah, I can help you real quick, do that thing that takes 4 sets of hands,
Yeah.
or your brother, like you said, or some other friends. You grew up here, so you've got a network.
Yeah.
Who is a huge factor.
The people that I knew were, a lot of blue collar guys. When I first moved back to Durham, I actually worked with a couple of guys setting tile.
Right.
And so that just, I had done, most aspects of construction up to that point, but I hadn't really done a lot of plumbing or tile work. And that gave me just a couple more tools in my belt for down the road. And, they were incredible tile guys. So I didn't learn how to, cheap out. Like we were doing, $500,000, $1 million houses and, Governor's Club or, Wakefield Plantation. And
yeah, that's serious stuff.
they,
if you're just to be able to like get a phone call from someone in the Governor's Club means you're in another level of quality.
It is.
But it also means you're going in and you got to deal with another level of headache.
Oh yeah.
It has to be flawless.
Yeah. And I mean, there's nothing like having to cut a piece of tile that costs, $300 for each little, 1 foot square.
Yeah, some like one of a kind Italian marble that's
and
like
you're trying
imported.
to cut a circle out of it so you can drop a toilet in there. That gives you a little bit of
put hair on your chest.
Yeah, a little sweat on the brow. It's not for the faint of heart.
So this house that you buy, is this the house that I've been at?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
That's the house that I was living in when we first met.
Gotcha. Okay, just curious. So that house, how do you go about finding that? Do you have a realtor?
I did have a realtor.
Okay, how do you find the realtor?
Honestly, I just lucked into him.
Friend of a friend, or you Googled him? Or
honestly don't know how I came in. I think I wanted to see a house, and he may have been the representative for that house.
Oh, okay. So one of the ones you didn't end up buying.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember how I linked up with him. It was so long ago, and he quit as a realtor, so I wasn't able to use him in the future. But he was he was kind of a regular guy, like, drove a van, was not your typical realtor, but he was kind of more something like he was a little handy. He crawled around under the house with me, and he understood what I was coming for, looking for a property that I could fix and make my own, as opposed to one of the bajillion cookie cutter McMansions that was going up here.
And you mentioned that he moved on from realty, but hypothetically, if he was still a realtor, like, were you satisfied? Would you use him again?
Oh, totally. I tried to use him again in the future, and
he had retired or changed careers or both.
He had moved out of the area, I believe.
Oh, okay, so. Gotcha.
But either way, he's not doing it around here.
Gotcha. So, and again, this is some years ago, so if you don't remember, that's fine. But so you meet this realtor, cool, and then you obviously get shown this house by him, and you say, okay, this is the one.
Yeah, so I, kind of digressing a little bit, I was also a surveyor in a former life. So I had a lot of experience, with property boundaries and kind of reading the GIS maps. And, so I did a lot of research on all the properties I was looking at to make sure that I knew where the property lines were and kind of what I was getting into, which he really appreciated, because most buyers don't even know that that's a thing.
Right, and most realtors are just a slave to the info they can find. They can't just like get a survey done. And for those listening, a surveyor, your property has boundaries. It has a line that you can't see. Your fence is not it. Sometimes it's on it, but there is an imaginary line, and the GIS is the like service website that has those lines, and a surveyor is the professional person that comes in and locates the corners and puts little like stakes with little orange flags so that you can have like official confirmed lines. This is crucial when you're having a dispute with a neighbor or putting in a fence or building a house, because there are laws that determine how far, what's called a setback, how far you're allowed to be as close rather to that line. And you got to be within an inch if you're trying to like really squeeze a house on a really small lot. This is a crucial thing.
Yeah. But it was, so I had done a lot of research on this particular house. Once I saw it and knew that it was kind of something I was interested in, and it just fit all the criteria. Like it had a tiny little half-acre lot, but it was at the end of a dead-end road that sunk into a natural space for the neighborhood next door. So
like a wooded park kind of thing.
Yeah, and
Gotcha.
it was unbuilt. That area was unbuildable because that neighborhood had to maintain X amount of green space. So
survey wise, it's not yours. It's not your land. But as far as the eye is concerned, you basically have 5 acres of woods kind of behind your house that you'll never have a neighbor.
Exactly.
And that's, I mean, if you want privacy, knowing that it can't be developed.
In Durham now, like that's.
Oh, I mean,
you can't find that.
This is years ago you're talking, but if you're talking now,
that
it's
house
unheard
of.
It.
Unfortunately, my wife stalks it on Zillow every once in a while, and the price on it has more than doubled since we sold it.
Oh, I'm sure.
And just 4 years ago that we sold it.
Oh, wow. Has it been 4 years? Where did the time go?
But, so, doing all the research, knowing that, it's set where it did, and then, seeing all the issues, because it had a lot of issues. But it was also, single-story ranch, so it didn't have a lot of, inside there were no load-bearing walls except for the exterior walls.
Right.
So I could pretty much blank slate it to do what I wanted. And it, I'm one of those people that can look past the garbage, and it had a lot of garbage and a lot of things wrong with it. But it also had a lot of potential, which, I went through and I completely gutted the entire house. And
let's break that down. Okay. So you go in and you start, you get a dumpster or whatever.
Yep.
I'm assuming
it had the cheesy 70s wood paneling.
Okay. So you got to rip that crap off.
All that stuff.
And then below that, probably
there was nothing. That was
no sheetrock, no plaster.
Yeah. Back then it was just, studs. Instead of drywall, they threw that up.
Okay, so you rip this paneling off, and then what else are you removing? What are you gutting? Walls that are not load bearing?
All the kitchen cabinets and all that stuff went.
Sledgehammer's fun.
I opened up several walls because it had a living room and a sitting room that were totally separate. You had to basically do a big loop around the house to get from one to the other.
Right.
And knocked a big hole in that, and it wasn't an open concept house at that point, but it really changed the flow so that we could, and again, it's a couple of jack studs and a header to open it up and support it, and there you go.
Yeah.
Now you can walk easily from the living room into the kitchen.
Right. Yeah, not necessarily open concept, but opener.
There's only so open I could really go without, because I was also trying to keep it cheap.
Yeah, and also, if memory serves, like you needed that pantry closet in the kitchen, and it's not like you could just get rid of everything. Yeah.
And so I was definitely working within the footprint.
For sure.
And, but even like the cabinets that I got, at the time, my mom was volunteering at Habitat for Humanity, their thrift store.
Right.
And they had these cabinets come in that were, beautiful pecan, custom. They were insanely nice.
Like way too good for the Habitat store.
Oh yeah. Well, it was right on the border of Chapel Hill, so they were getting these, things donated out of Meadowmont and some of the nicer Chapel Hill developments, which actually worked out for me because, with these cabinets, the person that donated them had a couple of more that they just couldn't fit, and I wound up going to their house and picking them up as well.
Oh, wow.
But I had, this full set of cabinets that I, paid next to nothing for, that were worth as much as the house.
Right. Wow. Yeah. So that kind of leads back, if we're going to start to pick a theme for this episode, it's once again, we're kind of going back to who / your network. If your mom is not, if you're not doing this in the town you live in, where obviously your parents are here and your mom works at Habitat, and just, I mean, not to say that you couldn't have searched Habitat stores every other day and wasted the time and the gas, but that's definitely an amazing factor.
There was a theme with this house was of doing it cheap, and that was one of the things that I was able to parlay having my local network. But I also was going to Home Depot and Lowe's, about every other day or so, and I constantly hit all of the. I would go to different ones and see what was on the clearance racks, and most of the fixtures and bits and pieces I bought on clearance. All the tile that went into the house, I would go to the local tile shops, and they'd have pallet sales where you could you get this pallet of tile for X amount of money, but you had to take the whole pallet.
And it was like mismatched boxes.
Just odds and ends left over from jobs. There would usually be like one pile of, big enough to do something with, but then there'd be like half a dozen boxes of whatever that, I would take and I pieced together, and I got enough just green granite to do my countertop. It was all 12 by 12 tiles. And then I, just did a wood kind of face to it, and it didn't hold up for years and years, but it looked good. And
so this incredible combination / melting pot of your like hunting ability and your like, am I a professional tile guy? No, but I know enough about tile to take some scraps and make it into a countertop that,
Well, even the floors.
I do the floors.
I didn't have enough tile to do any one of the floors in any one type, because the dining room, the kitchen, and then I had a foyer that as you came in, and so what I did was I designed these big elaborate rug patterns in the middle of the floor, which were very custom and hard. That was something I did have to call in a friend for, because he was just a wizard with tile, and he was able to fit them in there perfectly. And so I've got these. For resale, it was a little bit of a, not something that was ideal, because it was very custom, but it was also like at the time, like, well, it didn't cost me anything to do it. Whoever buys this house, they're going to change it anyway, so they can change it to whatever they want. But it's a functional, good floor until then.
So you said something interesting that jived my head a little bit. You said it didn't cost me anything. So to me, I so disagree with that statement, because to me, the most valuable thing that I have, probably other than my body that is deteriorating, is my time. And so, you may have gotten the cheap pallet tile and then you tiled something with it that made the cost worthwhile, and then you did something with leftover tile. So it's free in that regard, but it sounds like quite a bit of time. So my question is, were you working at this time? Did you have like a day job?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was still working. Actually, at the time I was working with my dad.
Right. And what were you doing with your dad?
It was an environmental lab. So I did all the, shipping and receiving, and it was environmental equipment. We did air testing. So we rented equipment out to third parties who would go into the field and use our equipment to take a sample and then send it back to us, and we would analyze it. So the samples were always in sealed containers, but the equipment, being rental equipment, always got beat up.
Right.
And so one of my jobs was to repair it as well. So I just had my own little workshop there where I rehabbed expensive scientific equipment.
Gotcha.
Day in, day out. So
you've been using your hands since ever.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Just literally a handyman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. There are a few jobs that I've had in my life where I wasn't actually using my hands to do something.
Gotcha. Which is funny, because what do you do now?
I work for an engineering firm.
And you don't really use your hands.
I use my hands to type.
To type. That's how are you okay?
Yeah.
Do you need a hug?
It has its moments. It's I look at it as, I'm selling my soul for a couple years to be able to pay for something that I really want.
Gotcha.
And this is the perfect job for me, because I'm doing cool things. I'm watching these giant buildings grow up out of the ground, and the people I work with are pretty cool, and the people that I'm working with in the field are generally pretty cool, but I speak fluent construction worker and engineer, so that's kind of my job, is to be the translator, and it's a good fit for me. I like it.
That sounds awesome. I know some people are listening who have no idea what we're talking about, and that translator is sometimes extremely important because construction workers can look at plans and go, well, I know how to get to the same results in a different way.
Yeah.
And then the engineer goes, well, the whole point of doing it that way is because 40 pages later in the schematics, the electrician has to run a pipe that now you don't have room for said pipe. And there was a whole reason that we didn't just try to screw your day.
But sometimes engineers, when they're drawing things in their little cubicle and in that cubicle, it's an ideal world, it just always doesn't translate.
Yeah.
And there are times where, or the guy in the field will happen to know a better way or, a different way to achieve the same goal. And sometimes the engineers are receptive to having their ideas questioned. Sometimes they get a little protective of them. And I got to do the dance of, keeping everybody happy.
It's good though to at least have some of those guys on the team too. I mean, an amazing engineer brain who's also ability to take criticism. I mean, that's the kind of guy you want on your team.
Yeah.
Who's able to look at oh, what about this? And then at least consider it.
And it also depends on who it's coming from and how it's addressed to.
That's true.
Everybody,
Tone is everything.
Everybody has their moments.
Put it in an email if you sound like a jerk.
Yeah. Well, there are several people that I have to email with regularly that their emails come off jerky, whether they're trying to or not. But yeah, so it's interesting. But the engineers they're special people, and so are the construction workers.
Hey, we all need each other in that regard because you're doing like massive commercial buildings like schools.
I'm finishing up
stuff.
a high school now. I'm working on a building at a local college. A giant project in Carborough that's getting ready to start. So it's a lot of like public work stuff, and a bunch of little jobs, at state and local colleges and library and Apex.
Very cool. So I know a little bit of a tangent, circling back to the home.
Back to the home.
So you got this thing. You've scored on the cheap tile. You're hunting, for stuff at Lowe's and Home Depot, and
but there's still constantly, kicks to the gut. There was like one day, I was, at the time, my girlfriend, we were there, and it's one of the back bedrooms that I wasn't planning on doing anything at all to.
Right.
And we're like, all right, well, let's just rip the carpet up real quick, get it out to the dumpster, and we'll call it a day. Eat low-hanging fruit. This will be a good win for the day. And we start pulling up the carpet, and then come to find that the person who had occupied that room before had a waterbed that evidently leaked.
Oh, no.
Constantly. And he would just refill it with water instead of addressing the leak. So this had clearly been happening for at least a year or so, because underneath the carpet, the floor was completely rotted out where the bed was. And you could actually put your foot through the particle board into the insulation in areas. The only thing that was holding the waterbed up were the floor joists, which meant that, the water damage had spread into the neighboring room, which I hadn't noticed yet because, I hadn't pulled that carpet up. But, underneath all this, there's this black mold everywhere. And I literally had to cut up and replace an entire room of flooring. Several of the joists were even rotted out to the point where I had to scab in on them.
So you got to replace sheets of plywood, and then
all the insulation
and like the 2x10 or 2x8 or whatever.
Those 2x10s,
whatever it may have been, that's underneath that the plywood is nailed to.
Yep.
And where you cut that out and then how you make that connection. It's not like it's a piece of Lego. You've got screws and overlapping, and did you have to do any foundational support like blocks and footers? And
I did actually have to put in several because the house had a fireplace in it that was just for looks. So it was like a facade fireplace
So it was like a gas one that just looked good?
No, it was wood burning, but it just had a brick section in front of it that weighed probably 800,000 pounds.
Right.
that didn't have any kind of floor support underneath it. It was just built on the same floor joist as the rest of the house.
Oh, wow. Oh,
so
okay.
over the years, it had forced them down, where they joined up with their counterpart in the middle of the house, which caused that to lift up.
Right.
So walking down the hall in the middle of the house, there was a huge valley.
You have a hump and a valley.
Yeah.
Right. So you got like this camelback in the middle of your freaking right, because the chimney should be, and the brick surrounding or whatever should be built on its own footing and not necessarily like attached to the house. Definitely not resting on the wood floor.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was I honestly, I don't know. It was one of those.
There's no way to know. Yeah.
It was done in the 70s.
Right.
Early 70s. But, I had to actually jack up sections of the house to level out the floor joists and put in a support beam to fix all of that and then support that fireplace, because the brick had been drawn on by kids and just discolored by years and years of cigarette smoke. And I had, in my searches, found a pallet of gorgeous slate that I was going to cover up the fireplace with to make it look like a nice slate fireplace, which added several hundreds more pounds to it.
Oh, right. So you didn't want to just have this happen again.
Yeah.
So you had to put another.
I actually properly supported the fireplace.
Gotcha.
And then supported, the hall underneath, leveled everything up, and then put down, nail down maple hardwoods to help shore up and prevent that from happening again, because that good hardwood will really help to tie the whole floor together and keep it from shifting a bunch.
Right. And so continuing with the list of things that you did completely solo. So you now have, you've got the rot replaced, you've got carpets ripped up, you've got some foundation support in.
Yep.
So do you yourself go repatch that insulation down there?
Yep.
And then you yourself put in new floors after you fix the rot?
Yeah. So for that, it was just, new insulation and plywood, and then we carpeted in there. And I actually had somebody come in and do the carpet.
So you hired out the carpet part.
I hired out the carpet.
And so how do you go about hiring a carpet person?
Well, I actually bought the carpet myself. And I just, at the time, this was before even the internet was as big. So the yellow pages were still there. And I just looked in the yellow pages and called the first couple carpet people. One guy, like AAA carpet. He's like, yeah, I'll stretch it out and put it down for like $50. And he came out with a crew the next day, took him 20 minutes, and it was done.
Right. I mean, we're talking about a small square bedroom.
This was and actually they did 2 bedrooms. At
and
that
you
time.
And you said you already bought the product.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was literally, they just showed up, knocked it out, and walked away, and it was $50 a room.
Gotcha. So you just, at the time, you just yellow paged it. You called 2 guys, got some quotes, went with the cheapest guy. Yeah. Because this is just budget.
Yeah.
Probably.
And this was just literally stretching carpet. So
we're not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah. This was not a job that really required a lot of finesse.
So then what else? So after carpet, what else did you do or hire out?
Other than that, that was pretty much it.
What about the roof? Any issues that you had to address?
The roof was good.
Okay.
That was, again, one of the things, like the exterior of the house was good.
The windows were fine.
The windows were actually terrible, but
did you replace them or just said screw it?
We dealt with crappy windows, and even when we sold it, we left an allowance for replacing the windows because they were that bad.
Okay, so a lot of listeners have no idea what you just said. So let's just break that down real quick. So when you sold the house, you left an allowance. Now, obviously, everybody knows what the word allowance means. But when you sell a house, due to things that are just simply known that, like, we as the seller didn't have the time or probably the money to replace. Yeah. So the cost of the house is X, and we will give you that cost. We'll just lower that cost of the house, the amount we think window replacement in your case is worth.
Yeah.
So
100%.
Right. Okay. So just to make up numbers, you know, you sold your house for $200,000 and you said it's actually $190. Buy yourself.
That was actually about it. It was about $10,000 in windows. And
Gotcha.
we just left them that, because it was obvious, and we knew the first inspector that's going to come through, that was the first thing they're going to say is, they were old windows, they were all individual panes, the glazing was coming out, which is the caulk that goes around. They leaked horribly, especially in the wintertime. There were massive drafts,
killing your insulate or killing your bill of your utility bills, heating and air conditioning.
But it was just never in the budget.
Gotcha. And then, if memory serves, didn't you build a deck and a little tool shed?
Yep.
Gotcha. And you did those solo, just like friends or something?
Yeah, we did those after the fact.
What do you mean after the fact?
Like after we had finished the house.
Okay. So you do all the stuff we've mentioned. You and your girlfriend Jana move in.
Well, I moved in as soon as I got the master bedroom.
Livable.
The spot was kind of livable. I mean, the rest of the house, depending on your definition of livable. Some people.
Well, you were living in a truck, so
so it was a step up from that. But at the time,
everything's relative.
I had no plumbing. There was a toilet. I take that back. There was a toilet in the house.
So you were glamping.
Yeah. But there was no shower.
No shower. Toilet's clutch. If you had to pick one or the other, I personally would pick toilet and get a bag of baby wipes. If I had to pick one or the other.
Hook the hose up outside.
Hose. I've taken worse showers. I've been to Boy Scout camp where we just don't shower. So. Yeah. It's the worst.
Well, again,
use the
when
lake.
you're crawling around in dirty insulation and knocking out drywall, you kind of need a shower. Sometimes.
Yeah, you get pretty grimy, pretty dusty. Insulation could potentially be the worst thing ever because even if it doesn't get on you, you still feel itchy because it's like if you're within 10 feet of it, it's like you mentally are like, I need to like bathe in like a yogurt anti-itch bath or like it's a skunk or something. It's the worst. Yeah. Don't do insulation if you're listening. Just hire insulation people. Yeah. Just it's the worst. If you absolutely have no money, buy one of those suits.
Yeah, that's how I did it. I got a Tyvek suit and I crawled it under the house and I stuck all the insulation up. And,
still the worst.
It was it's not fun.
Yeah, especially in a crawl space. Yes. Yeah, if we're talking like your house where you're just like standing, I could maybe make the argument of like, okay, fine.
It was a dirty crawl space.
Dirty crawl space. But, and then so then you kind of finish the bulk, let's call it, and then you build a shed.
Yep.
And did you buy one of those like Home Depot kits?
I looked at them, and again, it was one of those like for the cost of the kit, I could buy the parts and make it myself bigger and better.
And you still got to put the kit together.
Exactly.
Yeah, gotcha. And usually those kits are like using 1 inch by 3 inch studs instead of true like 1.5 by 3.5, what we call a 2x4. Yeah, like it's all like a little thinner, a little shittier, just little like the screws are a little weaker and a little cheaper, and it's like it'll hold. They stress test it and they even warranty it, I think. But it's just you just know it's not going to get 20 years.
Well, it's also one of those things like structurally they're not solid until they're all together.
Right, like they don't become strong until everything is tied together. Whereas, like when you frame a house,
the plywood supports the framing, and it's all it's all a unit, and then it's strong. But in a real structure, like the framing should be able to support itself, without any kind of extra support. Which, again, I always have been like it's beat into me from my dad was anything worth doing is worth doing right,
and overbuild. Always overbuilt.
It's a shed, but it was it had a loft and it was kind of 2-story, and so again, it's like if I built it with my own thought of like using it as a workshop, but I also had the whole time this house was like it was not going to be our forever house. It was we're going to sell it here as soon as we can and move on.
And that's very much an interesting mindset in itself because that mindset more than often changes where people buy their house and like, oh my God, we're going to live in this house forever. And then they get pregnant or they just realize they need an office or they just simply want more space or reason 107 later, who knows what it could be. And and everybody's opinion's allowed to change once you get new info and they realize that it's not their forever home. But you went into it day one. Like, I'm buying this. It's a fixer-upper. I am sick of giving apartment complexes the same amount of money I could give for a mortgage payment. And screw them. I'm going to do this. And we know that this is a stepping stone.
Yeah. And, I mean, it was, but it also wasn't. Like, I was very particular about it. Because if I was going to live there, I I wanted it to be a place that I could be comfortable for 5 or 10 or 15 years if I had to be.
So it wasn't what we call a flip.
No.
You were still like, I need to make a house.
Yeah.
But I
wanted
just
something
know that
comfortable
this
for
is
me.
not the 20-year house, or the forever house is a better term. Right.
Yeah. Right. And so it, but again, I had that like thought in there. It's like, all right, down the road, if kids are going to be playing in this and it's going to be like a clubhouse or something, like that roof's, that second story, it's got to be structural enough that somebody's not going to get hurt.
Right.
And it's,
boys will be boys. So if they're going to bring their friends over and be playing, using it as monkey bars or whatever.
Well, even in my use, I had, wood and, heavy stuff stored up there. I didn't want it falling down on my head. There's, and again, just overbuilt. Like there's, like the deck, when I put it on, we had the thought of, all right, if we are here for another 10 or 15 years, we wanted more house because it was a fairly small house.
Right.
So we designed that so that we could enclose it into kind of a solarium or something, make the walls, it's like sliding glass doors.
Like a screened in, but with real walls, like glass. Yeah. Okay.
And, it was, had the appropriate support to where we could do that. And
so when you built the deck, you forget about overbuilding just because you and I like the term. You actually were like, I'm building this deck to support like a legit home, walls, roof, like as if it was a house. You built the supports thick enough, big enough.
It was capable of, because we weren't sure what we might do. It was either supporting walls and a roof, or B, supporting a hot tub.
A hot tub, right? Yeah, that's a big one for decks.
And so it was like, either way, it's got to be overbuilt for just a deck.
Yeah, very few realize that the water in the hot tub is the weight.
Oh yeah, it's
the hot tub is fiberglass and lined with little wood. It's that weight. It's not even the people really.
Yeah,
because
you could put gallons of water.
Yeah, you could put 6 people in that same circular circumference on a deck in chairs, in heavy chairs, and it's not a problem. But all that water is so heavy. People don't really realize it, and that leads to very much different support requirements when you're building a deck, and similar to if you're adding walls for a solarium, right? So when you build that deck, you have that in mind. You build that extra strong. Did you guys ever get to that stage where you're like, let's add that?
No, it
didn't you have like a deck fiasco with an inspector?
There was a little bit of a fiasco. We had some discussions over my use of hardware. He did not like the level of galvanization on all the
level of So for those who don't know, galvanized nails, screws, bolts, however, hardware is the difference between non-galvanized you use inside the house. Galvanized is for exterior, so it doesn't rust.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there is galvanized, and then there's hot dipped galvanized.
Different levels.
So the plain galvanized has kind of a smooth finish to it, and where it's visible, it doesn't look terrible. The hot dipped literally is dipped in hot zinc, and it looks like it's got melted zinc all over it. It looks terrible.
Yeah, if you're walking down the Home Depot aisle, you'll see the ones that are still shiny and then the ones that are gray. And those are the ones that's like, you don't care because you don't see them.
The way my deck was designed, you could actually see some of those.
Yeah.
And I was unwilling to compromise. And he was unwilling to pass me on the deck at that point. So we just agreed to disagree, and I built the deck, and he even told me, he's like, yeah, you could drive a truck on this thing. I was like, yeah, I know that. So why are you failing me? And he said, well, you don't have the right galvanization. Like it's, in 15 years they could rust up. All right, well.
And is that in fact true? Because and I feel like as the general contractor here, I should know, but guess what, everybody? I have code books that I get to use as a constant encyclopedia to look up to.
It actually is. The less galvanized stuff in contact with the pressure-treated wood, the newer pressure-treated woods are more corrosive to the zinc, which can cause it to rust out quicker, which can, in theory, cause problems in a lot shorter time than you would think.
Gotcha. And it is fail-worthy, or was he just a young and dumb inspector who was trying to prove his? Because that is a thing, everybody.
Yeah, it's
unfortunately,
it was legit. But as the homeowner who was doing it myself, it was not legit enough that I was going to go through and change it all.
So you just said, I'm not swapping them. And then when he left, you were like, I'll swap them. And then you just didn't. And you just never called in for final inspection.
Yeah, basically.
And your bomb-proof deck is still bomb-proof.
And, you know, down
well,
the
you've
road,
sold the house.
I
so.
sold the house, yeah.
It's not your problem anymore.
Yeah, that's it. It's
we'll keep that address undisclosed. No.
Yeah. But yeah, that deck's not going anywhere. And it, you know, it's one of those things that
it's interesting though how you even got a permit. And I'm not trying to like advocate for people to get a permit or don't get a permit. You should probably just follow the rules and regs of your city and state and county and township, and all of them have their own rules and regs. But the amount of people that I know who built a deck with no permit and have no idea what they're doing. I mean, you did both. You knew what you were doing. You overbuilt it, and you got a permit.
So, but the reason that I did was because down the road, I potentially wanted to be able to put walls and a roof over it. And in order to do that and establish that it was appropriately built to do that down the road, like to get the permit
for that,
putting the extra room on the house, I couldn't do that without a permit.
Right.
And to get a permit for that, you would have to show that the deck was built solid enough.
Right. Or you'd have to lie and be like, it's pre-existing. And then they'd have to come inspect that it was strong enough, and you'd get the same
even still
galvanized bolt issue.
Since it didn't have it's a deck, so it didn't have a footer around it like a typical wall foundation. It was built on sonotubes, which are, cardboard tubes that sink down into the ground X number of inches or feet.
And then filled with concrete.
And rebar. Yeah. But again, the inspector, before I poured them, he came out and verified that they were deep enough and that they were full of rebar and proper, so that for that next permit, if I needed it, they could look back and say, yes, the foundation was built to code. It is strong enough and proper to support a roof load.
Did you put screen underneath the decking boards to block bugs for the future solarium enclosure?
Still, I knew that if I was going to put something above it, I was just going to put an actual floor down.
Okay. So you were always like, we're not going to keep this decking if we go more. Yeah, no. Okay. Because that's some things that people do. They're like, well, we don't have the money for the screened-in porch right now, but laying the screen down with some staples and then putting the decking down so that if we build the screened-in walls, we don't get the bugs from underneath. Like, that's a very cheap planning thing that you can do, when you're, sandwich that screen between the decking and the joists. So, for the future. Mm-hmm. But obviously you already had this planned out. So got a little deck snafu, but I mean, you lived many years there and I believe we had a barbecue there. That deck was not shaking.
Oh no.
A lot of people, a lot of food.
I've had, like you could drive a truck on it and it wouldn't have flexed. But, we ultimately, wound up just needing a little more space.
Right.
We built it was very wooded.
Is that you're referring to why you've moved houses since? Is you just needed physically more room? You don't have kids, same dog. You just needed physically more. You need
it was just
bedrooms cramped.
It was nice, but Durham was getting busier. There was a lot more traffic, and again, it wasn't our forever. It was a very comfortable home. We made it our home, but it was wooded, so we couldn't really have the big garden that we wanted. We couldn't. We had a couple of chickens, but it's.
And you mean more food rather than decorative?
Yeah. We had like a little, 15 by like 25 plot that, the neighbors cut down some trees and we cut down some trees, so it was right on the property line, and it got enough light to muddle by, and we actually produced a lot of food in it. But it was just, my wife was getting a lot more into gardening. I always wanted some space to spread out. And since Durham was kind of encroaching in on us, we started looking.
Right.
And, we didn't have to move. It gave us that luxury of, taking our time again and being able to shop around and, do that due diligence until you find the diamond in the rough that, you can work with.
And that's an amazing luxury that not everybody has. Like the fact that you were like, okay, My wife doesn't maybe love her job, but she's got work. I have a great job. We have a wonderful home. We're not being rushed out, or we don't have a lease ending, or we need to come up with this money. A family member died, or whatever, as my dad loves to say, the cat ate the pencil, for just like whatever reason it could be. And you could really take your time. So we mentioned earlier in the podcast, your buddy or realtor who became buddy moves. So do you find another realtor, and how do you do that?
Well, so at that point, again, since I was a surveyor, I was really comfortable looking at property. And by this time we had kind of decided that, building a house from scratch was probably more of an option than, if we got lucky and found the perfect house on the perfect property, awesome. But I wasn't counting on that.
Right.
And, with all the things I learned and, rebuilding this house we were in now and, over the years, I was like, yeah, I can do this.
Right. If you find a house that's 95% perfect, you can do the 5% yourself almost, or you can have the people now, the network. Yeah.
And, or if I find the perfect property that's just raw, I'm perfectly comfortable, designing and building a house on it. So I started looking and, looking at just property, you don't really need a realtor, because if it's raw land, you can always drive up to it.
Right. Yeah.
There's a for sale sign in it. You may need to talk to a neighbor or a realtor or something if you're really going to go walking around on it. But again, as somebody who's proficient, looking at the maps and looking at the GIS.
So you're just like, this is my circle of where I could live. Let's start hunting for land. That's kind of the mindset. And about how long do you hunt for land before you find? I know we're gonna probably dive into the amazing story of us building this home that in fact did get built, and we'll do that on another episode. But just for a little bit, how about how long before you, but how many parcels do you drive up to and go, this could be it, or this sucks?
I mean,
20,
honestly,
30?
Yeah, it was at least 20 or 30.
Hunting. Yeah. Really hunting.
Just drive it,
because now you are thinking more like, this is it. This is the forever.
Yeah, that was our intention. Like we were if we were going to go through the struggle of building a house, that was going to be it. Right. Like we're going to do this as our forever house. At that point, we were knocking on 40, so this, and we were looking for a farm space with trees and stuff that takes years to grow and produce. So to do something like that, we had to have a long-term plan for being there.
Right.
And so it was, there were a lot of criteria that we had. It had to have water, it had to have privacy, it had to have people not going to be building neighborhoods all up on top of it. It had to be close enough to stuff.
Right.
Because, again, if we're going to be there forever, we don't want to have to drive an hour to get to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Or 2 hours.
Well, you just grow all your own groceries. No,
I mean, there's always something.
I'm just pulling your leg. Obviously, you can't grow everything. It's not possible. And, it is, but it's not.
Let's be realistic. I'm a creature of comfort. I like my stuff. I like to go out to dinner. I like to, there's,
you have a life to live other than farming and building a house. You can only farm so much and build so much house, and then you've got to blow off some steam and go to a movie or whatever.
Yeah.
So again, we'll like dive more into that. But when you finally get, you find this land, and we'll talk more about it again. Like I said, do you use a friend's realtor to sell that other house?
So what happened was I had been looking at property for probably a year or two at that point, and hadn't really come across anything that I loved. There certainly weren't any houses that I loved enough to get a realtor involved to where I could take a tour of the house. And finally, one came up, because it was also usually just me going out and looking at these like during my lunch break, I'd ride out.
Right.
Because it had to be, if I couldn't drive there, on a long lunch, then it wasn't a commute that I was willing to do. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of a gauge. And every once in a while there'd be one that was nice enough. I'd get Jana, we would ride out together and look at it. And, but none of them were really, we didn't have to move. So we were being really, really picky.
Right.
And
which, for the record, everybody, is allowed. It's your dream home.
Exactly.
Be picky.
Yeah. Don't settle.
Don't settle.
But we finally did come across a house that I needed a realtor to look at. Or actually, I can't remember. I had put out some of the because you can fill out these online like, hey, I need a realtor, or I want to look at a house or something, and then you'll get like 40 real estate agents who'll start calling and emailing you.
Oh yeah,
like it's a little bit annoying.
It's like when you get a speeding ticket and you get letters from like lawyers who are checking the list, and they're like, oh, you got a speeding ticket? I can get you off for 149. Well, I can do it for 148. Well, I do it for 147. It's like, guys, I have a lawyer.
So, but this guy actually, he sent me an email like in response to one of those things. And he was like, yeah, I see you're looking at some land. He's like, I actually have a friend who has a bunch of land that he is parceling out himself kind of privately. So he's like, I don't know if that's something you'd be interested in, but he's like, I'm happy to show you the property that you want to see, but I've also got other leads that may not be on the MLS.
And the MLS, everybody, is the like official, this house is listed for sale. Yeah. It is viewable by the public, but it's basically how real estate agents look and get notifications about everything. So
for sale by owner houses will not be on the MLS.
Right.
Anything listed by a realtor goes on there.
And nothing you're thinking about listing will be on the MLS till you list it. So this is you kind of snuck in the back door a little bit.
Yeah, which actually ultimately was not how we found the property.
Right.
But was how we found the realtor because...
And he became the realtor who sold your house.
Who we bought the new property and sold our...
Okay, so he just became your realtor.
Yeah, and to this day, if I have to buy or sell anything, he's the man.
So you just answered my next question, was satisfied, would use again. And what's his name? Shout out.
His name is, oh God, what is
he was so good. I can't remember his
Texeria.
name. Victor Texeria. Shout out to Victor Texeria.
Nothing like the mind fart there.
Yeah.
But no, he, it was just, he was a good guy. He knew about property. He had land specifically. Like he was kind of in the same market as me, honestly. He and his wife were looking to buy some land to do the same thing me and my wife were doing. So I was
very easy to bond over that.
Yeah, and we could kind of bounce ideas. Like he really liked some of my thoughts, and I liked the fact that he had his finger on the pulse of the real estate. So he helped kind of speed it up a little bit. But again, ultimately, the property that we found was something. It had been on the market for almost a year. And
a year,
almost.
So usually when something's on the market for more than like 40-ish days, that's usually a red flag of sorts. There's a massive issue. Like for me, that's my bread and butter, because I want the house with the massive issue because I'm buying it to gut it, and I don't give a crap.
And at the end of the day, that's a whole other story, but that's how we got, it was a pile of crap.
Yeah. And when he sells your house, does he come up with the amount of money it's worth? Did you get the amount of money? Did he, put in his work to show it a lot? Did you get more than you asked for?
This was right when the housing market in Durham was starting to
explode,
just take off.
Yeah.
So with its location, it was still a little bit out of town.
With your custom floors.
It had a lot again, because he came in and looked at it, and he's like, oh, you need to paint these cabinets. And I just looked at him dead. I was like, Victor, I'm not committing that sacrilege.
Like this is as is.
If whoever wants this kitchen wants to paint these beautiful pecan cabinets, they are welcome to do it. But I will not, because you can't undo that kind of thing.
Right. That's true. Yeah. I mean, we though are a unique, we align 100% on this, the love of the look of raw materials.
Oh yeah.
Like we sometimes will not paint something or stain something or whatever, and we're like, just put a clear coat. I want to see the grain or the steel or whatever.
The cabinet, it was incredible, woodworking. They were gorgeous, And I was like, that's everything else. Like, we had started scraping some of the ceilings,
popcorn.
So we did some of that,
which is the worst.
But he's like, you got to do the rest of it. Paint a couple of rooms, like just. He talked to Jana about, staging it because we kind of got rid of some of our furniture and stuff and brought in some others just to make it look nice.
So he did work. He did his work. He came in with a real list of stuff that's both doable and you could do. Yeah. And he set a number. Yep. So he earned his
we came up with a number.
Yeah.
Together, because
you know what you bought it for, and you know what you spent, and he doesn't.
And he, had the comps, and because that was the thing, especially at the time, because you could, if you priced it at that sweet spot, you could get a bidding war.
Right, and comps, everybody's short for comparable. So a real estate agent will look for similar sized houses with similar sized aesthetics in similar sized similar neighborhoods to try to figure out a jumping off / starting point of what that house should be listed for. Yeah. Because if you try to list a house for $400,000 and every other house is exactly the same in the same neighborhood for $300,000, everybody's going to go, why is it $100,000 more? And upon touring, they will realize it's not worth it. And it'll just sit there and it'll be a red flag when you see that it's been, for sale for a year instead of just sold, especially in the Durham market where houses were selling in a
literally day. We listed it on a Friday, and my mother-in-law was coming to visit that Friday. We got a call that
like a week later or that day?
That Friday.
Okay, that day.
She was coming in that day. We listed it that day. And because we didn't really we expected some activity over the weekend, so we were just going to kind of take her out and go enjoy the town while it was being showed. It was a madhouse all weekend. It got showed like 5 times. Like once, literally, like as soon as we listed it, they were like, "Oh, well, can we come over now?" And so, my wife and like her mom shows up, and she's like, "Hey, Mom,
we're going out to dinner.
Nice to see you. Can you help me clean this up real quick? We got to leave." Yeah. So
clean the toilets.
Yeah, and so, but by Monday we had 3 offers.
Wow, all above asking.
We wound up getting basically right at or within 1,000 more.
You got what you needed. Yeah, is really the way of putting it. Because you also just mentioned that you had to drop something like 10 grand for the window.
Yeah. Which again, that was one of those things that talking to the realtor, he was like, it's not ideal to do stuff like that, but at the time we kind of had to sell it quickly because we had planned on keeping it and living in it while we were building our new house.
And we'll dive all into that.
Yet another monkey wrench there.
Yeah. Gotcha. Wow. Man, I really just appreciate you taking the time. I know it's hard to remember some of this stuff from years ago, but to me, it's all fascinating. And I'm sure somebody is listening going, well, man, I am handy enough to do it, and I don't have the guts. Well, guess what? Yeah. You've got the guts.
And I didn't even have YouTube to look up half of this stuff.
Right. He didn't have YouTube. Yeah. But you did have, and you took advantage of.
I had friends.
You had friends, and you had a network that you were not afraid to, barter some favors. And also, I think a key thing to mention once again was you had the ability, not like it's a skill people can't develop, but you had the ability to take a breath and look at some garbage and go, well, you can clean up garbage and you can paint and you could fix that and kind of see through the junk.
Yeah, you've got to be able to look past the stuff.
A little bit of vision.
Yeah. Like so many people, you come into a house that you're looking to buy and, the homeowners painted the walls like, bright orange or.
Hey, don't be attacking orange in this house, sir.
But you know what I mean? If it's like some kind of very bright, very custom color.
Or whatever color, if it's just not your color, or you can get turned off by it very quickly.
Gaudy tile rugs in your kitchen and dining room that are permanent in the house that, it makes it very custom. So you've got to be able to look past that stuff.
Yeah, paint and floors are very cheap and easy and very customizable. So you walk in and you hate the floor and you hate the paint. Well, guess what? In the scheme of your $300,000 home, it's like $5,000 or whatever
Yeah,
to
that's
change
peanuts.
those out, and you can have your palette.
Yeah.
So it's like,
You know,
that's a skill.
You know, I've seen, and it's something that I've kind of got to get on my wife about when we were looking. It's like she is not that visual of a person. It was harder for her to like walk into a house and be like, oh, this is the perfect view. This is the perfect place. You just have to look past some of the issues.
Right.
And, you know, she is much better at that, but it takes her a few steps. And
right.
you kind of, I would have to sit her down and be like, all right, look at it this way. Just
right.
Don't focus on the stuff that's changeable. Focus on the stuff that's not. The bones, the structure, the view, the trees in the yard, like even some of them, like you can or you can't change. Like that's, you know, there are things that you have to work around and things that you don't.
It's very well put. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it once again. And I look forward to the next one. I'm actually very excited to talk about the new construction process that we went through. And I think that's it's going to be some good content. Hopefully the viewers will really, or the listeners, I guess I should say. But yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah,
bye, everybody.
Thanks for having me, man.
Appreciate it.